Chapter 2 of Book 7 of Les Misérables, Volume 4, by Victor Hugo. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Algie Pug. Les Misérables, Volume 4, by Victor Hugo. Translated by Isabel Florence Hapgood. Book 7, Slang. Chapter 2. Chapter 2. Roots. Slang is the tongue of those who sit in darkness. Thought is moved in its most sombre depths, social philosophy is bidden to its most poignant meditations in the presence of that enigmatic dialect at once so blighted and rebellious. Therein lies chastisement made visible. Every syllable has an air of being marked. The words of the vulgar tongue appear therein wrinkled and shrivelled, as it were, beneath the hot iron of the executioner. Some seem to be still smoking. Such and such a phrase produces upon you the effect of the shoulder of a thief branded with the fleur de lis, which has suddenly been laid bare. Ideas almost refuse to be expressed in these substantives, which are fugitives from justice. Metaphor is sometimes so shameless that one feels that it has worn the iron neck fetter. Moreover, in spite of all this, and because of all this strange dialect has by rights its own compartment in that great impartial case of pigeon-holes where there is room for the rusty farthing as well as for the gold medal, and which is called literature. Slang, whether the public admit the fact or not, has its syntax and its poetry. It is a language. Yes, by the deformity of certain terms, we recognize the fact that it was chewed by Mandrin, and by the splendor of certain metonymies, we feel that Villon spoke it. That exquisite and celebrated verse, Mais où sont les neiges d'antan? But where are the snows of years gone by? Is a verse of slang. Antam, ante annum, is a word of Thun slang, which signified the past year, and by extension, formerly. 35 years ago, at the epoch of the departure of the great chain gang, there could be read in one of the cells at Bicêtre this maxim engraved with a nail on the wall by a king of Thun condemned to the galleys: Le daube d'antan trémait sempre pour la pierre de Sèvres. This means kings in days gone by always went and had themselves anointed. In the opinion of that king, anointment meant the galleys. The word décarade, which expresses the departure of heavy vehicles at a gallop, is attributed to Villon, and it is worthy of him. This word, which strikes fire with all four of its feet, sums up in a masterly onomatopoeia the whole of La Fontaine's admirable verse: Six forts chevaux tiraient un coche. 6 stout horses drew a coach. From a purely literary point of view, few studies would prove more curious and fruitful than the study of slang. It is a whole language within a language, a sort of sickly excrescence, an unhealthy graft which has produced a vegetation, a parasite which has its roots in the old Gallic trunk, and whose sinister foliage crawls all over one side of the language. This is what may be called the first, the vulgar aspect of slang. But for those who study the tongue as it should be studied, that is to say, as geologists study the earth, slang appears like a veritable alluvial deposit. According as one digs a longer or shorter distance into it, one finds in slang, below the old popular French, Provençal, Spanish, Italian, Levantine, that language of the Mediterranean ports, English and German, the Romance language in its 3 varieties, French, Italian, and Romance, Latin, and finally Basque and Celtic, a profound and unique formation, a subterranean edifice erected in common by all the miserable. Each accursed race has deposited its layer, each suffering has dropped its stone there, each heart has contributed its pebble. A throng of evil, base, or irritated souls, who have traversed life and have vanished into eternity, linger there almost entirely visible still beneath the form of some monstrous word. Do you want Spanish? The old Gothic slang abounded in it. Here is boffet, a box on the ear, which is derived from bofeton; ventan, window, later on ventin, which comes from vantana; gat, cat, which comes from gatto; acite, oil, which comes from acete. Do you want Italian? Here is spade, sword, which comes from spada; carvel, boat, which comes from caravella. Do you want English? Here is bichot, which comes from bishop; raya, spy, which comes from rascal, rascalion; pilch, a case, which comes from pilcher, a sheath. Do you want German? Here is the Keller, the waiter, Kellner; the Herz, the master, Herzog, duke. Do you want Latin? Here is frangir, to break, frangere, a fourrer; to steal, fur; cadene, chain, catena. There is one word which crops up in every language of the continent, with a sort of mysterious power and authority. It is the word magnus. The Scotchman makes of it his mac, which designates the chief of the clan, MacFarlane, MacCallumore, the great Farlane, the great Cullamore. Slang turns it into mec, and later lemec, that is to say, God. Would you like Basque? Here is Gahisto, the devil, which comes from Gaistor, evil; Sorgabon, good night, which comes from Gabon, good evening. Do you want Celtic? Here is blavin, a handkerchief, which comes from blaver, gushing water; Ménesse, a woman, in a bad sense, which comes from mainec, full of stones; Barant, brook, which comes from baranton, fountain; Goffeur, locksmith, from goff, blacksmith; Guedeuse, death, which comes from guendu, black, white. Finally, would you like history? Slang calls crowns le maltese, a souvenir of the coin in circulation on the galleys of Malta. In addition to the philological origins just indicated, slang possesses other and still more natural roots, which spring, so to speak, from the mind of man itself. In the first place, the direct creation of words. Therein lies the mystery of tongues. To paint with words, which contains figures one knows not how or why, is a primitive foundation of all human languages, what may be called their granite. Slang abounds in words of this description, immediate words, words created instantaneously no one knows either where or by whom, without etymology, without analogies, without derivatives, solitary, barbarous, sometimes hideous words, which at times possess a singular power of expression and which live. The executioner, le tôle; the forest, le sabri; fear, flight, tough; the lackey, le larbin; the mineral, the prefect, the minister, pharos; the devil, le rabouin. Nothing is stranger than these words which both mask and reveal. Some, le rabouin, for example, are at the same time grotesque and terrible, and produce on you the effect of a cyclopean grimace. In the second place, metaphor. The peculiarity of a language which is desirous of saying all, yet concealing all, is that it is rich in figures. Metaphor is an enigma, wherein the thief who is plotting a stroke, the prisoner who is arranging an escape take refuge. No idiom is more metaphorical than slang. Dévisser le coco, to unscrew the nut; to twist the neck; tortiller, to wriggle; to eat; être gerbe, to be tried; a rat, a bread thief; il en skin, it rains; a striking ancient figure which partly bears its date about it, which assimilates long oblique lines of rain, with the dense and slanting pikes of the lances, and which compresses into a single word the popular expression, it rains halberds. Sometimes, in proportion as slang progresses from the first epoch to the second, words pass from the primitive and savage sense to the metaphorical sense. the devil ceases to be le rabouin and becomes le boulanger.